I've been working on so many pretty things. I can't wait to share my favorites with you. Hi, my name is Sarah, and welcome to my channel, which is all about sewing and styling a handmade wardrobe. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you some of the things I've made recently. In the month of March, I took a little bit of time off from work and I had a bit of a sewcation, and so I was able to make a lot of things. In fact, too many that I don't have time to share them all with you, or this video would just be really long. So today we're just going to go over a handful of items that I've made recently that I really love, and if you want to see every single thing that I made in the month of March, then you can always check out my YouTube short. I have a whole playlist so you can see everything that I've made in the year of 2023 so far. Starting off with tops, this is the Sewaholic Pindrell blouse. This was on my Make 9 for 2023, and so I wanted to keep working on that and make sure that I am getting those projects sewn up. And the fabric is a viscose challis from Minerva, and I was sponsored this fabric for free in exchange for writing it up on their website, and I will link that post down below in case you want to read all the details. Now this is a very old pattern. It's been in my stash for a long time. It was one of the first indie patterns that I ever bought, and I actually bought the paper version because I believe that was the only thing that was available at the time. And I have made it up a couple of times, but I didn't really like my original versions, so I decided it was time to try it out again. So for this make, I went with a size 2 up at the top, and then I graded to a size 0 at the hip. And the reason that I did that is because Sewaholic drafts for pear-shaped figures, and I am not a pear shape. And in fact, even though I did grade down to a size 0, it's still pretty roomy in the hips, and I could have taken off even more. So if you're not a pear shape like me, you might want to measure the bottom at the hem to make sure that it's not too big, and you might want to size down a little bit. I also found that this top is extremely long, and so I did shorten mine 3 inches, and I really like the length that it is. It's easy to tuck in and it stays tucked, but I would say that the pattern as originally drafted is quite long. So the thing that I liked about this top is that it has princess seams, and so theoretically you have lots of different seam lines that you can use for fitting adjustments. Now fortunately for me, I didn't really need to make any adjustments, but I just like having that option. This top has a fairly high neckline, and in fact I would say it's a little bit hard to get it on and off over my head. It's not too bad, but just keep in mind, I think maybe it could have benefited from having like a keyhole in the back, but it's really not that huge of a deal. There are 3 different views of this top. You can make it as just a plain sleeveless shell, or you can do the view that I did with the ruffle cap sleeves. There's also a version with a pleated sleeve. Now I was really unsure about the ruffle sleeves. I didn't know if I would like it because the first time that I made it in kind of a stiff cotton, and I felt like I looked like a football player. In this drapey rayon, it's certainly not as stiff, and so it doesn't stand out as much, but I don't feel great in it. I feel like it kind of cuts me off at a weird angle and makes my arms look bigger, but that's just a little quibble. It's really not that big of a deal, and I can always layer it with a jacket over top if I'm feeling self-conscious about my arms. Now construction-wise, there is one thing I don't like about this pattern, and that's how they have you do the bindings. Now I don't mind that it has a neckline binding and armhole bindings, that part's fine. The thing that bothers me is it has a really wide seam allowance. You're supposed to stitch at 5/8 of an inch and then turn it to the inside and stitch it down so that the seams don't show. And I just think the 5/8 of an inch is just far too wide to be accurate. I much would prefer something that's 3/8 of an inch or even 1/4 of an inch. And so I think if I made this top again, I would just do that myself. Just trim down the bindings and the armholes and the neckline to be less of a seam allowance, so it'd be easier to be more accurate. I wouldn't have to trim as much off of the seam allowance in order to turn it down into the inside and get it to stitch neatly. Other than that, it is a really simple, easy pattern to sew, and I do think that it's cute. I think that if I made it again, I probably would just do the version that is the straight up shell without any of the floofy sleeve stuff. But I don't know, let me know in the comments if you think that the ruffle sleeves work for me or not. I'm still a little bit unsure. Truth be told, I actually have not worn this yet. It's only just gotten warm enough to wear short sleeves without something over top of it. But I am looking forward to trying it out and deciding once and for all if this is something I can get on board with or whether I should just skip it next time. The next top that I want to share with you is the Jolie Lab Agate blouse. This was my first time trying this company. It is a French pattern company, and they have so many beautiful designs. I was really excited to try out one of their patterns and see how it worked for myself. The fabric that I used is another Minerva brand ambassador project, so I was given this for free. This is from their core range, and it's a linen textured look fabric. It's actually a cotton, but it has kind of a linen look to it. And I would say that it's similar in weight to like a cotton poplin. Now for sizing, I made a size 36 and I did a small bust adjustment. I shortened the body by 1 inch and I shortened the sleeves 2.5 inches. Now I really like the style of this blouse, and the pattern has a few different options. I chose to do the narrow cuff. I added the shorter ruffle to the neckline, and I also added the ruffle to the yoke here. And just to note that this ruffle is lined, while this ruffle is not. So you hem this one, and this one you just fold it in half and gather it as one piece. The fastening is done with this keyhole front, and then you add a little button loop. And I have worn this one, and I found that the keyhole comes down a little bit low. I think the next time that I make it, I would probably raise it up an inch just to make sure that my bra's not going to peek out. It's really not a big deal, but there is that tiny bit of risk. And so I don't necessarily like wearing this to work, or if I did wear it to work, I would wear a cami underneath just to make sure that this part is covered up. Now the construction for this went relatively well except for one thing. So I did not realize that French pattern companies mark the sleeve notches in the reverse than what I'm used to. And so they use a double notch to mark the front and a single notch to mark the back. And apparently that was actually written in French on the pattern pieces, but because I don't read French, I didn't realize that it said front and back in French. So I actually ended up inserting my sleeves backwards. And you think that I would have noticed something because the notches didn't line up on the front and the back, but sometimes, because when I snip my notches, especially when I have a really narrow seam allowance, I will snip them like really teeny tiny, and so it doesn't always go all the way through both layers. And so when I was constructing it, I just kind of thought, oh, I must not have marked the notches properly or something. And it wasn't until I finished the entire blouse and tried it on that I realized that the sleeves were in backwards, because this little vent here was sticking up on the outside of my arm instead of on the inside of my arm. And I was like, oh no, that's not right. So after a little bit of frustration and cursing, I did go ahead and go back in and rip out the sleeves because I had serged them and everything. Like the whole thing was completely done. I did go ahead and rip out those seams and then put the sleeves in properly so that they lay the right way. So that was just one little hiccup with the pattern, but other than that, it went really well. And now that I actually know that about French patterns, I won't get tripped up again, hopefully. Now for the most part, I really like this blouse. I like the color, and I think that this cotton actually has a nice amount of body and it really shows the details well. The only thing that I don't necessarily love is I feel like this ruffly collar is maybe a little bit clownish. There's actually a view that has an even larger ruffle, so I'm really glad I didn't do that one. I think if I made it again in this kind of fabric, I would be tempted to just skip the neckline ruffle, keep the one in the yoke, but just have like the plain band that fastens with the button. But also, I think that maybe if I wanted to do this version with the ruffle again, I would just use a softer drapier fabric like a rayon, and then I think it would be a little bit less clowny. Other than that, I think that the blouse is really pretty and I'm very happy with it. And I'm actually excited to try the pattern again in the future because there are the different options. You can make another version that looks totally different from your original. So the last top that I want to share with you is the Fiber Mood Ermine blouse. This was another pattern that was on my Make 9 challenge, and I also made this up for the Sew April Blouse 23 challenge on Instagram. This fabric is a cotton double gauze that I bought from Stylemaker Fabrics a couple of years ago. I made the size extra small and I shortened the sleeves by 2.5 inches, but I didn't make any other fit adjustments. I did find that the armholes come up really high, and I didn't actually know that until I made it and tried it on at the end because I did not muslin this one. It's fine and I can still wear it, but I just found it a little bit odd because that is not normally an issue that I have with fitting. So just be warned that I do think that the pattern armholes are drafted strangely high, and you might want to check that if you want to make this. Now design-wise, I knew that I always wanted to do something to highlight this gathered yoke seam. This is a really popular pattern, so it's been made on Instagram many times, and the versions that I always liked the best were the ones that did something in a contrast so that you could really see the seaming detail. So I've seen people use, like a stripe or a plaid fabric and then play with the direction of the stripes or the plaids on that yoke. I've seen people use a different fabric, like a lace for the yoke and then a solid for the rest of it. But I decided what I wanted to do was to add piping. So because I didn't feel like driving to Joann's and I have like an endless supply basically of quilting cotton, I decided to make my own flat piping. Now I've put flat piping on a quilt before, but never on a garment. And so since it was my first time, it went okay, but not great. I did put it both in the yoke seam and on the button band and also on the back yoke here. And then I did the binding so that it's visible on the outside so you can see the blue at the neckline. And also I bound the sleeves. The regular pattern tells you to just hem it, but I wanted that extra navy blue to really stand out so that you would have those extra details on my blouse. Now I don't want to get bogged into the details of why it was such a pain to put the flat piping on the button band, but it did give me a little bit of a headache with just trying to figure out everything so that all of the ends were covered, and I did end up having to unpick it a few times and fix it, but in the end it did work out. It doesn't look perfectly even, but I think that's part of the charm, hopefully. I literally just finished this one and it's just come out of the wash, and so I haven't worn it yet, but I'm really looking forward to wearing it. I actually think that because it's a double gauze, I'll be able to wear this year round because double gauze is oddly warm in the wintertime, but it's also nice and cool in the summer. So I'm really glad that I am expanding my skill set and trying new things. I did enjoy putting the piping on, even though it did require a little bit more thought. I do think that adding those little extra details to my clothing is working out really well for me, and I hope to do more of it in the future. Now the next thing I want to share with you is my most recently finished make. It's hot off the press. This is a vintage Simplicity pattern. It's Simplicity 8871, and I was given this pattern by my friend Andra from Andra Makes. Andra has been sending me her vintage patterns that are not in her size. In the smaller size bracket, she sends them on to me, which is so incredibly generous of her. So thank you so much, Andra. And I didn't want to just collect these patterns and like keep them in a box. I wanted to actually use some of them. So I picked out this one, which is a wardrobe pattern, but one of the items that it contains is a pair of pleated pants. It's from 1987. It's very 80s on the cover. But this particular style of pleated trouser is super on trend right now, and I wanted to go ahead and give this a try. Now this pattern only comes in a size 12, which was actually really nice because it's a single size. It had all of the seam allowances marked, and that made it really easy for me to measure the flat pattern to see where I needed to make adjustments. I did lower the front rise by 3/4 of an inch, and I also shaved quite a bit off of the hips because they were going to come out really wide on me. I took 5/8 of an inch off at the side seams on both the front and the back pattern. And then I also ended up shortening the legs by 8¼ inches. The fabric that I used is a leftover piece of linen rayon that I got from the fabric market, and I made my Vicky Sews Kaya blouse out of it. I had originally bought 3 yards of that fabric because I wanted to make a jumpsuit, and so I had plenty of fabric to make both that shirt and also these pair of pants. Now unfortunately, when I tried the two pieces on together, they did not look good because this pant is a little bit oversized and the shirt is also oversized, and so the two of them combined was just too much. I looked like I was wearing a pink prison jumpsuit, basically. It was not good. But I did try this on with a variety of other tops in my wardrobe, and I really do think it's going to be a versatile piece, even though it is such a bright color. And I'm really glad that I made it. And before I get to mention it, the most interesting thing about this particular pair of pants is how you get into it. So I kept looking at the pattern envelope to see how long the zipper needed to be, and I could not find that anywhere, and I'm combing through the pattern and looking at the instructions, and it doesn't say anything about putting in a zipper, and I'm like, where do I put the zipper in? And then it finally hit me that there is no zipper, because the way you actually get in and out of this is that there is a hook and bar closure right here by the left pocket, and then it just opens out like this. So you get in and out of it through the pocket, and then you just fasten up the hook and bar, and that's it. It's actually very similar to the Megan Nielsen Flint pants if you have made those before. So I thought that that was just such a cool and interesting detail, and it made it really, really easy to construct. And I enjoyed this so much that I think that I might want to make more of them. I was actually thinking it might be really fun to make them into shorts, that would be really nice for summer, but I could also see myself making the pants again as well. They have these nice slash pockets, and you can still use the pocket even with the opening here. And then the back is just plain. There's no pockets or welt pockets on the back. So it's just a really quick and easy make. And like I said, I tried it on with several different tops in my wardrobe. It didn't look good with everything, but there were a number of options that I can go to, and so I do think these pants are going to get a lot of wear, and I'm really looking forward to styling them. Now let's move on to dresses. I made a couple of dresses in March, and the first one I want to talk about is the Pattern Emporium Take the Chance shirt dress. And I made this out of a purple double gauze fabric that I got from Joann's. I am an affiliate for Pattern Emporium, and so if you use my links down in the description box, I will get a small percentage of the sale. So there's lots of options with this pattern. I decided to make the version that just has the bodice with the buttons. The buttons don't go all the way down the skirt. I did the wide short sleeve, and I did the mini dress, which has 2 tiers. I cut a size 6 at the shoulders and I graded up to a size 8 at the chest. But in retrospect, I could have done a straight size 4. This is pretty oversized, and in this double gauze, I do feel like it's maybe a little bit too big for me. Maybe if I had made it in a rayon, it would have been more drapey and I wouldn't have noticed the oversizedness as much. But I do think that if I want to make this pattern again, I probably will just size down to a 4. I think that it would fit better. Oh, and I also added the inseam pockets, and I also put on little belt loops at the side seams so that I can wear this with a belt. Because it is so oversized, I think that it looks a little bit better on me with a belt, but I can also wear it without a belt on those super hot days when you just don't want anything covering your body, and it'll be nice for that too. So I really love this purple double gauze. I've been wanting to add more purple items to my wardrobe, and surprisingly, it's actually been kind of difficult for me to find purple fabrics that I like. I would think that purple would be abundant because I'm pretty sure it's the most popular favorite color for women, but for some reason I'm just having a hard time even finding purple fabrics. This one was actually already in my stash because I bought it last year thinking that I would make a dress, but I do really like this shade of purple. I think it's really pretty, and I would like to add more things in this color to my wardrobe because I do think that it suits me nicely. So the last dress that I have to share with you is the Vicky Sews Esther dress, and unfortunately I don't have it here on a hanger because it is in the wash. This one was a 2-for-1. I used it as my Vicky Sews brand ambassador project for April, and I also used it as a Minerva project because they did sponsor me the fabric. It's their exclusive linen viscose blend, and it's a really beautiful fabric. When it first arrived in the mail, it was a little bit textured. Like, I won't say that it was rough, but you could feel the texture, and also the weave seemed a little bit loose to me. But after I threw it in the washer and dryer, it actually kind of tightened up a little bit. It became a lot softer, a lot drapier, and it wasn't as, like, holey is not the right word, but it didn't have as much texture. So I do highly recommend this fabric. I think that it is beautiful. It would be good for so many different applications, and it comes in a lot of really beautiful prints. For the pattern, I made the size 36 in the shortest height bracket, and I did make a muslin of the bodice because I really wanted to make sure that that square neckline was going to fit me properly. Now, before I even cut out the muslin, I went ahead and did a 3/4 inch small bust adjustment, and I added 1 inch to the waist. And the way that I did that was by taking shallower darts. And because I knew that it wasn't going to fit me out of the packet, so I went ahead and made those adjustments, then did the muslin. And then after making the muslin, I decided I wanted even a little bit more room in the waist, and so I added another inch to the side seams. So overall, I added 2 inches at the waist with a 3/4 inch small bust adjustment. I also added inseam pockets. The pattern does not come with pockets, but I really wanted pockets in this dress, but that was an easy addition. And the other thing that's actually not an alteration, but it is a design change, is that I didn't shorten the dress. So the dress is intended to be a midi dress, and on me, because I'm so short, the dress was at my ankle length, and I decided to just leave it at that length. I actually was really unsure about what length I wanted the dress to be, but I'm like, I'll just cut it long, and then if I decide that I don't like it and I want it shorter, then I'll just cut it off. But once I actually sewed up the dress and tried it on, I actually really like the ankle length. I do think that it looks better on me with heels rather than flats. But overall, I'm really happy with the long length. I think that it's really, really beautiful. Now, I have not worn this dress for an entire day yet, but it did take me a while to take the photos, and I was really surprised and sort of impressed with myself at the fit in the bodice. Because of the square neckline, I was really worried that it was going to fall off my shoulders or gape, and I have to say that it fits pretty well. Like, when I put it on, it kind of feels like it's going to fall off the shoulders, but when I took the photos and everything, it stayed in place. It didn't really move around. There is maybe a tiny bit of gaping in the back, but I do kind of think that's the nature of a square neckline because both the back and the front are such a sharp angle. It's not going to conform to the curves of your body perfectly, so I think a minimal amount of gaping is just sort of expected. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's just been my experience with any square neckline. I do think that the match of the fabric to the pattern was perfect, and I just absolutely love this dress. It is my favorite thing that I've made recently. And I cannot wait until it comes out of the wash because I just want to put it on and wear it. It's such a pretty, swishy, flowy dress. It makes me really happy. So those were all of the recent makes that I wanted to share with you today. And if you want to see even more things that I've been making, watch this one next.